Indeed, I am going up the country. At the close of today's show, I'm out the door and off to the airport and onto an airplane and gone for 2 weeks. Dwayne will handle the duties tomorrow, and then we've got Dwayne, Kurt Schlichter, Mark Davis. Who am I forgetting here? Ed Morrissey, and I think that's it. Have I forgotten someone? Dwayne, Schlichter, Davis, Morrissey, Dwayne. That's it. That's next week and the week thereafter. You know them all. You'll love them all. And I get to go on a big news day. And I know it's a big news day because I got called in to do America's Newsroom this morning with Bill Hemmer and Dana Perino. And we covered 3 subjects in the course of 5.5 minutes. So I'm going to use that to set up the show today. Here's my hit with Fox News this morning with Bill and Dana.
Hewitt is here with us, Fox News contributor. Great to have you. Senator Kennedy was on with Laura Ingraham last night saying this.
I think it's pretty clear that the president has tariff authority. Congress gave it to him. Sooner or later, the Supreme Court is going to have to address this. Those who oppose the executive branch and those who oppose the legislative branch and are seeking recourse in the courts are at some point going to dig up more snakes than they can kill.
All right, Hugh, this all came down last night. A lot of people looking at it and from lots of different directions. So many opinions. What's yours?
Well, good morning, Dana. Good morning, Bill. I read the opinion this morning by Judges Katzman, Reif, and Rustani. The trade court is just another district court. It just has 3 district court judges hearing this. They're very good at trade matters, not so good at con law. It will be appealed to the Federal Circuit. It will eventually end up at the Supreme Court. I understand their ruling on the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, but they don't do a lot of con law, and I do not understand why they did not stay their injunction, because they are messing up a lot of ongoing negotiations. So I think it was reckless in the extreme for 3 district court judges to mess up all these international trade issues. And I do understand the China trade tariffs as being national security. I can even understand the 10% international, the global 10% tariff as being related to as a sort of tax on our defense budget that we do for the rest of the world. So whatever the opinion of these 3 judges, they're just district judges. They're not very self-aware. It's got to get up to the Federal Circuit. I hope it's stayed immediately. It's got to eventually go to the Supreme Court because the IEEP it's a case of first impression for this kind of a question under the IEEP of 77. So it'll eventually get to the Supreme Court. So I just wish they had stayed it, and I hope the Federal Circuit stays it today.
Okay, this is like the court in the corner, right? I mean, who had ever heard of it? But, I mean, most of us had not, and 95% of the people watching same. Now, with regard to Secretary of State Marco Rubio, he wants to crack down on the number of visas given to Chinese students. Read 2 things for you here. The investigation uncovering Chinese academic espionage at Stanford. You're quite familiar with that. And here are the number of student visas from China. It's the line in yellow versus other countries, which is the line above it in gray. So significant number of students from China. What do you think about the merits of this, Hugh?
I think they're great merits. I would revoke every single one of them until, for example, Jimmy Lai is freed by Xi Jinping, the General Secretary of the Communist Party there. And I would send them all back and then carefully vet every one of them, because it is well known, and it was known in Trump 1, that most of the students here on visas from China are under duress of the communists in China, meaning that they've got family, they've got friends, they've got instructions, and not all. But if you've got 300,000, I believe that's the number, students here from the PRC, they're all beholden to the Chinese Communist Party one way or the other. And if even only 10% of them, 30,000, are actively engaged in spying and stealing and espionage, that's a major problem. So I think Secretary Rubio is continuing what Secretary Pompeo did under President Trump in his first term, which is crack down on the Chinese Communist Party and its agents in the United States. So I'm 100% with them. Send them home. When they free Jimmy Lai, he's being honored by the Brandley Foundation tonight, we can start talking again about a new vetting process. But we ought to be aware. It's like having Germans in the United States in 1935 to 1938. We have to really wonder, what are they doing and to whom are they doing it?
President Xi's daughter herself actually attended Harvard. In 2014,
Yeah.
she graduated. She was had a pseudonym that she graduated under. This is the New York Times. I don't know if this is the best argument. I've heard better ones, but here, let me read this to you from the New York Times. That the directive will no doubt fuel worries amongst the roughly 275,000 Chinese students in the United States, as well as professors and university administrators who depend on their research skills and financial support. I mean, is that something we can do without?
Dana, I'm sympathetic to some of these who are innocent, but I'm worried about the national security of the United States. And the fact of the matter is the largest espionage operation ever conducted in history is being conducted by the CCP against us right now. We are in Cold War 2.0. People have to wake up. Secretary Rubio was chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee before he went over to Foggy Bottom. He knows of which he speaks, and pretty much everybody who studies this space knows that this is a problem. We've just ignored it because the money they bring to the universities is so great.
So a message from the White House is, how do you offer 300,000 student visas to Chinese nationals every year when you know they're legally required to gather intelligence for the CCP? Hewitt, we'll see where Hugh, thank you. Hugh Hewitt, we'll see where that goes. Thanks for coming.
And I love, we move quickly through that. Now I want to slow down a little bit and go back to the Court of International Trade. It's a good court. They're very smart. They're stuck away up in New York. They have a very limited jurisdiction, specialized court. So they get this whopping big declaration of Liberation Day by President Trump, and they're the trial court. They get the first whack at it. And they invoke a couple of things in their opinion, including the non-delegation doctrine, which most of us who teach con law tell our students is dead, dead, dead. Maybe it's in a coma. Maybe it will be resurrected by the Federal Circuit or by the Supreme Court. But as far as I know, it's dead, dead, dead. And for them to invoke that in whole or part, then they also say, and even if it's not an illegal delegation of authority to the president, he's not done it the right way, which is they're on better, firmer footing there. But as I read it, I said to myself, okay, this all makes sense. They're three smart people. They will give their opinion that an injunction ought to be, they'll enter an injunction, and then they will stay the effect of it until such time as the Trump administration has an opportunity to appeal it. They did not do that, meaning that supposedly all the tariffs are back on. I pity the poor guy who's putting the stickers on and off of the goods and keeping track of the tariffs to collect. Do we have to give the money back that we collected under the tariffs? It's billions of dollars. The courts are not very practical sometimes. The practical thing would have been to say, we think this is wrong. We don't think he can do this. I voiced the same concern about the IEEP of 1977, that they don't have the authority to do this. I've said that on this show. You've heard me say, I worry about this, and it got tested in the First Circuit, by the way, as well. There are concurrent cases going on. But this is quicker. Federal Circuit sits here in D.C., I believe. They'll get it. I hope they stay the injunction and have some briefing, some oral argument. We'll get a second opinion. And if they don't stay it, if the Federal Circuit's in D.C., and I've never argued before the Federal Circuit, so I don't know, they can't. I think the justice who would be their justice of first resort would also be the Chief Justice, because he's the D.C. Circuit Justice. I hope he issues a stay and refers it to the court, not for the shadow docket, but for October. And first Monday in October, they come back, schedule an early hearing, have a full briefing. It's a big deal. This is a case of first impression. And for those of you who remember con law distantly, if you're a lawyer, Justice Robert Jackson in the Youngstown Sheet and Tube cases, called the Steel Seizure cases, said there are three zones of presidential power. It's not the majority opinion, but it's the most influential. Zone number one, flood tide of the presidential power, is when the president is acting with his inherent authority of Section 2 of the Constitution, plus a grant of authority from Congress. That's where Trump is. Now, over here in Article 3 are the courts, and they can overturn a flood zone of authority that he's doing that. That's perfectly reasonable for them to do, and the Supreme Court might uphold them. But there's no reason to run in. There's also no reason to forget to take my relief factor early today. So I'm doing it on the air. If you're watching on the Salem News Channel, taking it early, because it's going to be a long day and night and day before I lay my head down to rest again, because we're going a long way to get to the Hillsdale College cruise. So here's my relief factor, and I'm taking it. I'm doing it right now for a simple reason. When you take Relief Factor every day, you get the levels of icariin and curcumin and resveratrol and omega up in your system, and then you feel better. The minor aches and pains go away, and even when you have long days ahead, long travel days, the dreaded overhead bag on an international flight, that's really a dreaded overhead bin, then you'll be better. You'll feel better from start to finish. So go and try the initial starter pack 1995. Call 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief, 1-800-4-RELIEF, or go find the starter pack offer at their website, relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. Try it. You'll thank me when I get back. During my monologue, which was essentially a repeat of what I said at 9 a.m. on Fox News, America's Newsroom with Bill Hemmer and Dana Perino, the Federal Circuit, in fact, stayed the order of the International Court of Trade, the Court of International Trade. And the Court of International Trade is just a dressed-up, specialized district court. And they ought not to have entered that injunction. They should have entered it and stayed it. And I said it at 9 a.m., I posted it on X, and I made my monologue about it, and lo and behold, I have summoned the rain. And the rain fell. No, not really. It's not really. I'm not Kreskin either. That's a reference that a lot of you won't get. But I don't have I'm not a prophet nor the son of the prophet. I've been just teaching con law for a long time. And when the president is in his national security zone, it may be that the three-judge panel, the district court on the Court of International Trade, is correct. It may be that it turns out. But they're invoking the non-delegation doctrine, which is in a coma, if not dead. And they're messing with everything out there, and the 10% tariff and the China tariffs and the fentanyl tariffs and all that stuff. And they just blithely roll a hand grenade into the trade negotiations. Yeah, the Federal Circuit was going to stay that. And if they reinstate it after briefing and argument, the Supreme Court's going to stay it. Because this is a case of first impression. It's a big, big, big deal about what the president... Now, I don't think he wins everything on this. I think that they had better come prepared to submit some declarations about the national security reasoning behind some of these tariffs. Now, I think the best argument for the 10% global tariff is that the United States, in effect, the United States guarantees freedoms of the sea and international law to the extent that it is everywhere applied. We do the most of the heavy lift. NATO does some. Australia does a lot for its size. Japan does some. Every country does some except for the bad guy countries like Cuba and Venezuela, North Korea, Russia, Iran, and, of course, the big bad guy, China. But it's a Cold War world. There are two sides on the fence, and we do most of the fence patrolling. And we've got the nuclear shield that really intimidates China and Russia. We keep the peace. We're the marshal. And it's very expensive, and no one sends us a check. So Trump's 10% tariff, I thought, okay, in his mind, at least in my mind, that's a deal. We'll take 10% on everything, and that will help us fund the Department of Defense and lower our deficit, and it's not going to really raise inflation because of the substitutionary effect of shopping in America. You can always get X if Y's gone up in price. There's a way to substitute. Just think about how many brands of cereal there are on the shelf, and there are lots of toys everywhere. You don't have to give up the number of dolls you want. You'll find dolls made in America that are cheaper if you want after the tariffs. You don't get fewer pencils. God knows I need pencils. I need color pencils. Pencils are like lethal, not lethal, but they are sedative darts for Kate. We love pencils for Genghis Kate. So bravo to the Federal Circuit and bravo to me. I like being right. I might be a little bit insufferable for the rest of the show. Generalissimo, do you think I'm going to be a little bit insufferable for the rest of the show now that I called it?
Because yeah, and it happened while you were doing your monologue, calling your shot. The appellate court said, "Yeah, he's right.
He's right." So I just so am I right on everything?
You're not right on most things.
Well, I was wondering if I was right about the ceiling tiles in our studio that you've got to replace.
What do you mean you're right about it? What does that mean?
They've got to be replaced.
Okay, so replace them. It's your studio.
Oh, no, I'm not there. I'm going on vacation. I wanted to talk to you about myphdweightloss.com. 864
644
1900. That's
864
644
1900.
Do you realize that by having you replace the ceiling tiles, that I'm helping you with myphdweightloss.com.
No, you're not helping at all, actually.
No, it's good for exercise. It's stretching. It requires you to stress out a little bit, and you can get some calorie loss that way, I think.
Okay.
And it doesn't involve eating any of the foods that are prohibited by My PhD Weight Loss, right?
And it clearly doesn't involve you.
864.
644.
1900. I didn't lose 50 pounds on it. I didn't have to. In fact, I'm below my playing weight. My playing weight is supposed to be 185, and I'm going on vacation at 182.
Well, you're going on a cruise for 2 weeks. You'll probably put that back on.
That's why I lost the weight. That's why I did a lot of miles. I only did 3 miles today, but I did a lot of miles because I knew I was going out there. But I want people to know you don't have to get the fat shot, to quote President Trump. You can, in fact, do what Dwayne did, lose 50 pounds over what? How many months?
3.
And kept it off for 2 years?
About 2.5.
2.5. 864.
644.
1900. You know what else you can do to get that weight loss off? You can buy a besthotgrill.com.
Oh, no, that's absolutely true.
No, yes, it is, because if you grill your food, if you grill fish, chicken, and beef, all of which are My PhD weight loss approved, right?
Oh, absolutely.
You can do it better on the besthotgrill.com.
No doubt.
Do you have the huge monster grill or the medium-sized grill?
I have the huge monster grill with the 2 infrared heating elements, and it's just glorious.
And it's made in America. It's made by our friends Rhett and Irene. I've got one on both coasts, up to 1,000 degrees in 3 minutes. Now, I like my steak well done, so I have to leave it on there for 90 seconds. How long do you leave your steak on there? For like a half a second?
Well, no, not well. It's not quite that long, but I've got different people in the house that like steaks at different temperatures. So I go everywhere from medium rare to medium plus to medium well.
All right, so that's what besthotgrill.com does, and we love it. We really do love it. We recommend it highly. And you can try it before you buy it. And if you're buying for a grad who doesn't need a big grill, get him the hibachi, the small one. If you're buying for dad or grandpa, get him the big one. And whichever one you get, if you get one of the big ones, try it before you buy it. Go to besthotgrill.com, find out for yourself. One thing I want to do. Yesterday, the very last read I did on the show was for andrewandtodd.com. Today, I want to do it in the first hour. And I moved them around because people are doing, right now it's noon, lunchtime in LA and in San Diego, and I'm on in all of California. And by the way, California, you should elect Steve Hilton, because the only way to actually get a house built in California is to swap out all the Democrats and put in Republicans. That's my message right now. But if you're buying a house anywhere, East Coast to West, andrewandtodd.com, 888-888-1172. Now, I've known Andrew for 25 years. I'm usually in a Bible study with him every week. I'm off for 3 weeks, and I just want to tell you, he and Todd Avakian are the very best in the business. You're doing a reverse mortgage because you're a senior and you need some cash out of your house. That's andrewandtodd.com. You're a veteran, you don't want to put any money down. That's andrewandtodd.com. First-time home buyer, poor credit, great credit, a lot of equity, no equity, whatever it is you're bringing to the table, big down payment, little down payment, give andrewandtodd.com a call, 888-888-1172, and say to him, I need help. Hewitt says you helped him, and they did. Helped every member of his family, and he did. Helped Dwayne, and he did. Helped other people in Salem, and he did. Andrew and Todd did. So go there, 888-888-1172 or andrewandtodd.com. Jonathan Williams is the president and chief economist at ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council. Now, Jonathan, I got 2 sets of talking points today, subjects to cover with you, and I'm going to do them both. So I'm going to ask you to stay for an extra segment. Have you got time to do that?
Happy to do that, Hugh, always.
Oh, great. Because the first one is Medicaid. Now, I confess to you, I don't know what to do about Medicaid because the president said he's not going to change it. What does the American Legislative Exchange Council members want Congress to consider as they go about that?
Well, I think, the big, beautiful bill that was just shepherded through the House beautifully by Speaker Mike Johnson and Virginia Fox at the Rules Committee put in yeoman's work. That made some important changes, Hugh, and I think the Senate may even look to go further. But I mean, what the House did is actually come forward with the common sense work requirements that so many states have looked to engage in if they were able to get waivers from the federal government to do so. And that's going to have some major savings while not cutting Medicaid, which is, of course, what the liberal media would like all of us to believe, that somehow Medicaid is going to wither on the vine again. With these kind of reductions, these are not actual cuts. These are just common sense reforms that make sure that people at least work or volunteer something basic like 20 hours a week, Hugh. I mean, we're not talking about a huge commitment here, but that's something that is a common sense reform supported by a huge majority of Americans. And another key piece here is making sure those not in the country legally are not able to partake. And that's something that many states across the country have looked at. There's also issue of people that enroll across multiple states fraudulently. And you look at reports from the GAO, for instance, and they can find a Medicaid fraud over a 10-year window ranging in the $1 trillion range. So we're talking about ways to clean up Medicaid and to actually preserve it. And this is where our ALEC members come down, is Medicaid ought to be a social safety net as it was designed to protect those really in need, the disabled, the elderly, and those with children that otherwise cannot work in the workforce. And that's, I think, what the House is looking to do, and the Senate may even make it stronger, Hugh.
Now, I don't know if in the One Big Beautiful Bill they addressed people in the country illegally. In California, where I taught this year for a couple of months in California, illegals were welcome into Medi-Cal, which is the California version of Medicaid. I think Gavin Newsom is reversing course on that because they got a $12 billion deficit in California. But does the One Big Beautiful Bill say you've got to be in the country legally to be eligible for Medicaid?
That was my understanding of it, is it addresses that issue and the work requirement issue. And as part of the reforms that were driven by conservatives in the House, the implementation of these pieces would go from 2029 up to 2026. I mean, I think it didn't make a whole lot of sense to do something that we know needs to be done and wait until 2029 to implement it. So kudos to those that pushed to move up the implementation date to 2026. But one other piece on this, Hugh, is the incentives are all wrong all the way around when it comes to Medicaid. But one of the biggest problems is because of Obamacare, you have this piece where states now receive a federal match today of 90 cents on the dollar for the expansion population. And the expansion population in many cases is able-bodied working age males with no children. Now, states get that incentive to sign them up, and regardless of their legal status, regardless of potentially other fraud that's going on. And so I guess you look at some of these big blue states and you probably ask themselves, why wouldn't we sign these folks up? We get the political benefit for it, and we get to charge it to the federal government, read taxpayers from the other 49 states.
Jonathan, way back in the dark ages when Obamacare came along, Ovik Roy was on the program a lot, warning about this. It's a trap. Like the famous Star Trek thing, it's a trap. Don't go there. The Medicaid match is a trap. And I believe it declines over the years. But even that 10% goes up and it kills the states. We should never let the spending clause get out of control like that. Some states held out, right? Some states said, no, we don't want your money.
Well, thankfully, cooler heads did prevail in 10 states that have not taken the bait and expanded under the so-called Affordable Care Act. That match started out at 100%, Hugh, so you're right, that has gradually gone down to a 90% match. But juxtapose that for a minute versus the traditional Medicaid population of the disabled and the elderly and those that cannot work. That average federal match to the states is somewhere between 50 and 60%, I think, based on the state. And so we're giving more incentive for states to enroll individuals that should not be enrolled than to actually take care of people that should be. And what we need to be talking about, if we want this as a social safety net, which I think most Americans do, and it's been ingrained in our culture since the 1960s, we need to have program integrity to ensure the resources are actually going to be there for those that are truly disabled.
All right, don't go anywhere, America. Jonathan's coming back on the other side, except to alec.org/Hugh, alec.org/Hugh. Sign up for the State of the State newsletters, or go to richstatepoorstate.com and get yourself a free book on how your state's doing across all the metrics that matter. Got more to talk about with Jonathan Williams on the other side. Don't go anywhere. He's not going anywhere, and I appreciate the time from the American Legislative Exchange Council. Jonathan Williams is the president of the American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC. You can get the ALEC free newsletter, alec.org/Hugh on the state of the states. You can also get the book, which Jonathan and I love to talk about every year, richstatespoorstates.com, for free, thanks to Alec's work. Jonathan, before we go to Texas and Oklahoma, let's talk about the One Big Beautiful Bill. I wrote a column about it for Fox News today. President Trump actually first called it that on this show on January 5th. He wanted One Big Beautiful Bill. So now H.R. 1 is One Big Beautiful Bill. That's its official title, which is kind of humorous to me. But you had 400 state legislators sign on. And it's not perfect, but the perfect must not be the enemy of the good. Is that the summary?
I think that's right. Is our ALEC legislators know that Americans did not want to see that massive middle class tax hike that would have happened automatically at the end of this year if Congress did nothing. And as we know in Washington, nothing comes completely without horse trading. And so there were some things in that bill that probably everyone wouldn't have loved. But I mean, the direction of it is right. And I think we staved off what could have been an economic catastrophe and multi-$1,000 tax increase for the average American hardworking taxpayer. So I think in that sense, I mean, Chairman Jason Smith, the ALEC alum of Ways and Means Committee, I know was a big proponent of the One Big Beautiful Bill concept. And there's a lot of important things that they got done there.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing the Senate's fingerprints. They're concerned with rural hospitals, and I think that's something they left themselves some wiggle room on the spending side to deal with. Okay, to the states. Texas Education Freedom Bill signed by Greg Abbott. It is Senate Bill 2. What's it do down in the great state of Texas?
Well, Texas now has become part of the national movement and a major victory for universal education, freedom, and parental empowerment. And our ALEC members have been leading the way for years on this topic and finally break through the logjam. The Senate has been really solid on this many sessions now, led by Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick and Senator Brandon Creighton. And now with the new Speaker of the House, Speaker Burrows, was able to get this across the finish line with many great assists along the way. And so this is going to be the largest by dollar amount in terms of children also affected across the country in the universal program. So an absolute massive victory. New Hampshire is going to be right around the corner, I think, at number 17 that we may want to talk about on the next show. But I think we deserve a major, major kudos given to Texas for this hard work over the course of so many years to get this across the finish line.
You know, John and I had a chance to have some coffee yesterday morning with education activists, longstanding education activists, and they agreed with me. They know about richstatespoorstates.org. You've got to put this metric into the ranking because it really will, over time, determine the future of a state if they reform education this way. Not half-heartedly, but wholeheartedly, like Texas and Ohio, especially Arizona, Florida, West Virginia. You know them all. The more that states embrace education freedom, the better off their future will be. Agree?
Oh, absolutely. And the combination between economic freedom and education freedom is the secret sauce. I think when you put those two things together, and all those states that you just mentioned have been states that have done just that. And that was Milton Friedman's contention. You combine those two great freedoms, and we're going to see amazing results. And it's turned around West Virginia, as we've talked about. Hugh, a state that had been out migration for 100 years straight, has now gone into the positive and gaining people from other states after doing school choice and actual economic freedom with tax cuts.
For the deficit hawks out there, the debt warriors, productivity solves all problems. Growth solves all problems. Education solves all problems. Let's talk about Oklahoma, because I am told Oklahoma had a pretty good 2025. Jonathan, what'd they do?
Well, they had an incredible month here in May as well. And this is, I think, Oklahoma deserves the Gold Star Award for the month of May, with Governor Kevin Stitt just last night signing into law another income tax rate reduction. But what this does is special in that it actually is going to be a phase out of the Oklahoma personal income tax over time, where they're buying it down with triggers as growth comes in. And Oklahoma is going to be on track to be the next no income tax state. We just talked about Texas. Oklahoma natives know they have to compete with zero on their southern border with Texas. That's not been a winning proposition, competing with the Lone Star State. And Governor Stitt and legislative leaders got it done last night. And the interesting thing about this, Hugh, and many big free market policy success stories have long story arcs. This one started really in the 1990s when then Governor Frank Keating talked about the need to eliminate the Oklahoma income tax. And here we are 30 plus years later, and they got it done across the finish line.
Well, I have a column in Fox News today about entitlement reform. The answer is to do things over 30 years. Don't do sudden things. Do like raise the retirement age a month a year for 40 years. That'll get it up to 69 in 2065. No one notices, no one cares, and that's the way to do it. I want to close by asking about Julie Daniels, who's the Oklahoma Senate Majority Leader and an ALEC member. You really do need experienced state legislators who learn stuff from ALEC to get stuff like this done, Jonathan. Has she been a worker bee for years?
She's been incredible. Senator Daniels, now as Majority Leader, is just an all-star legislator on the ALEC Board of Directors. And I think it's safe to say this and the REINS Act on regulatory reform and Chevron deference reform, hospital price transparency, she's got her fingerprints on all those key free market success stories. And we couldn't be more proud to have her serve on the ALEC Board. You need leaders like this that are willing to take the ball and run with it. And it's not, I talked about the executive branch. That's important, but it's got to get to their desk first. And it takes people like Senator Julie Daniels and her counterparts there in the state Senate and state House to do it.
The only bad thing that happened to Oklahoma this month is that the Supreme Court deadlocked 4-4 over whether or not their charter schools could support a Roman Catholic charter school, because Justice Amy Coney Barrett was recused. And I think one of the justices did a courtesy throw to the liberals because she wants to be the one to overturn Employment Division v. Smith. But their AG is really kind of messed up. You need to talk to him. Maybe get him to go to a couple of ALEC seminars when you get together in Indianapolis. By the way, Indianapolis is going to win the NBA title, I think, because they beat the Cavaliers, so they're the second best team, the Cavaliers. And you're going to be there in the middle. They'll still be celebrating in July when you go to Indianapolis, Jonathan.
You bet you. We're going to be there with Governor Braun and a whole lot of legislative leaders and our probably 1,500 plus best conservative friends. So hopefully you can join us.
Oh, I would love to, but I am going to be in the beautiful state of Maine in July. I'm going to see you in June, though. Jonathan William, Chief Economist, President of ALEC, thank you for staying the extra segment. Don't go anywhere, America, except to alec.org/Hugh and get the free newsletter on the state of the states inside the Beltway, leaving tonight for the next 2 weeks and a day. Dwayne, Ed Morrissey, Kurt Schlichter, Mark Davis, they'll be holding down the fort. Thank you. In my absence, they're going to be pitching you to please support Angel Tree. Now, you always step up for Angel Tree. Some of you do it first day I ask you. Some of you wait till the last day we ask you. But they can only plan for as many children as money we raise. It costs $200 to send a kid to camp for a week. Angel Tree really matters in the lives of these children. Listen to one alum.
Without camp, I definitely would not be the person that I am today. I would not know Christ. I would not be able to be the loving person that I am. I wouldn't have compassion. I wouldn't have a family. I wouldn't have a support system. And so being willing to support Angel Tree camping, it's not changing just a week for a kid. It's truly changing their life.
So could you call 888-206-2764? 888-206-2764. 888-206-2764. And if you're driving, you can't write something down. The number's on the Salem News Channel, if you can see it there. Always remember, whenever I do a campaign for Angel Tree, we put a banner at the top of HughHewitt.com, and you cannot miss it. Please be as generous as you can. I've challenged Dwayne to, wake the echoes and beat me. What we've done in 2 weeks, he's got to flog Schlichter and Morrissey and Davis and himself into beating me in the next 2 weeks what we've done in the first 2 weeks. But what you're really doing is, I hope he does. I really hope he does. I don't think he can, but I hope he does, because it benefits these children. Let me also remind you about one more sponsor, Job Creators Network. They're running taxcutsnow.com. I talked about it with Jonathan. I'm going to talk about it next hour. I'm going to talk about it again and again and again. I wrote about it for Fox News today, about how President Trump's one big beautiful bill was named right here on this show on January 5. President Trump said he wanted one big beautiful bill. And Chairman Smith told me we really shook things up with that interview back on January 5. And the president loved it, and he loves marketing, and he knows how to sell. He's the closer in chief. I wrote a column about it today. Well, if you go to taxcutsnow.com, join the team. All you have to do at taxcutsnow.com is they'll direct you to your senators, and you tell the senators. There's some senators who are saying they don't like this and they don't like that. And a couple of them we're not going to get. We might lose 2, we might lose 3. Can't lose more than 3. And I hope we don't lose any. Hope we get some Democrats. We can't have a 25% tax hike on January 1, 2026, or we'll kill the economy. So they're playing with fire by messing around with this. And the sooner the market knows, and I'll check the market during the break, the sooner the market knows that taxcutsnow.com is working, the sooner they'll get it done. So please go right now to taxcutsnow.com. Join the Job Creators Network, our sponsor, in bringing the message home to the senators in whose care it resides. Taxcutsnow.com. I'm breaking a lot of my rules this half hour. One of my rules is never have on someone who's way smarter than me, and Alan Dershowitz is. Never have on someone who's taught con law longer than me, and Alan Dershowitz has. And never have on an author of a book that I haven't read, and his brand new book, The Preventative State, has not caught up with me yet. But I know what it's about, so I'm going to ask him good questions. Professor Dershowitz, welcome. Congratulations on The Preventative State. We need this book. I want the answers in this book. So I'm going to begin with the simple question. What's going to shock me the most in The Preventative State?
That it's not political, that you wouldn't know reading the book whether I supported or opposed Biden or Trump or Kamala Harris. You wouldn't know whether I was a liberal or a conservative, a Republican or a Democrat. It's a book for all people who care about the future of our country. It's a book about how we are quietly and without any kind of debate moving toward a preventive state in which the government has the power to do things they've never had before based on artificial intelligence and our ability to predict cataclysmic events. And they're doing it for all good purposes. They're doing it to prevent the spread of disease, to prevent nuclear proliferation, to prevent terrorism, to prevent the kinds of killings we saw in the District of Columbia of these 2 young people. We're doing it for all the best purposes, but we're doing it in a way that threatens our civil liberties unless we construct a jurisprudence, a way of thinking about this. You know, we know that it's better to acquit 10 guilty people than to convict even one innocent person. But we don't know whether it's better to detain 10 innocent people in order to prevent 9/11 or Israel's October 7th or Pearl Harbor. We don't have a jurisprudence of prevention. And after 60 years of thinking about it and teaching it and writing about it, I finally decided to write what I consider my magnum opus, my most important book, The Preventive State. But you wouldn't know that it was an important book because the New York Times has refused to review any of my books since I defended Trump. Harvard University won't allow me to speak since I defended Trump. No liberal media will interview me or cover me because I'm now a defender of Donald Trump, even though I didn't vote for him the first 2 times, but because I defended his constitutional rights against an unconstitutional impeachment, I am absolutely canceled by the liberal media, the New York Times, CNN, you name it.
David Mamet was on the program yesterday about his brand new book, and he's lost a lot of friends. Yeah, well, David's lost a lot of friends because he says good things about Trump. He didn't defend Trump the way you did, but he said good things about Trump. I want to start, Professor Dershowitz, with a question I posed at his dining room table to Mark Zuckerberg when he invited a half dozen conservative pundits to come break bread with him. I said, Mark, can you predict who's going to be a school shooter? And he looked at me like, what? Like Minority Report? And I said, yeah, if you get enough data, this is before AI was a big deal, probably 6, 7 years ago. So if you get enough data together, can't you find a pattern that would suggest this individual who's on the internet, because they all leave trails, is going to be a school shooter? And he told me, no, I can't. Well, I think now we can, Professor. What do we do if we can?
Well, we have what are called red flag laws now, which are based on our ability to predict who the shooters will be. And we have a lot of false positives. We deny guns to people who would not use them improperly in order to prevent even one school shooting. So we're going to make mistakes. We're going to have either false positives or false negatives. A false positive is when you say a person's going to do it and you do something to him and he won't do it. A false negative is when you say, oh, he won't do it, and then he does it and we regret it horribly. So we're going to have those mistakes. And our question is how to balance those mistakes. I'll give you an example from history, the best example of history, and it's very central to my book, and I think a lot about this. 1935, Great Britain and France could have invaded Germany and prevented the Holocaust and prevented 50 million people from dying. In fact, Goebbels thought they would because he and the Nazis were violating the Versailles Treaty. But the British and the French decided, no, Hitler was really not as bad as people thought he was, so we're not going to do it. We're going to let them arm. We're going to let them be stronger. As the result of that false negative, 50 million people were killed. If Churchill had been the prime minister, he would have invaded Germany. And then he'd have been relegated to the bowels of history, saying he was a warmonger, he killed 10,000 people, it was needless, Hitler was never going to do any of these things. The problem with predicting is that science is blind to the future. And Mark, who I remember from college, Mark Zuckerberg, and I've met him since, is a brilliant guy. And he will be part of the ability to predict. We're not going to predict perfectly, but we will have a much better basis for predicting than we ever had before. And as the result, we'll make mistakes, but we'll make hopefully fewer mistakes.
So you cited the nostrum. It's actually a maxim that it is better to acquit 10 guilty than convict 1 innocent. I first heard that from a guy named Jerry Israel, who you may or may not have known. He taught me criminal pro at Michigan. And Jerry Israel, I think if he said it once, he said it 25 times. And so deeply embedded in me, and I get it. But we were dealing then with handguns and murders and things like that, not weapons of mass destruction you're mentioned in the publicity materials for the book. Does that change the standard when we're dealing with WMD and toxins and viruses?
Of course it does. First, number one, don't believe what Professor Israels or Professor Yale Camisar or Professor Alan Dershowitz read to you from Blackstone. We never believed that it was better for 10 guilty to go free than for 1 innocent to be wrongly confined. We said it, but we never believed it. Juries don't act that way. Prosecutors don't act that way. We don't want 10 murderers on the street. We're prepared to convict a couple of innocent people to prevent murders. So we never really abided by that. But surely we can't abide by that in the age of a nuclear catastrophe. And we don't. After 9/11, we certainly didn't abide by that. We tortured people. We confined them. We made a lot of mistakes in order to prevent another 9/11. If we could have prevented the first 9/11 by horribly detaining people. Look, we had an experience with this once after Pearl Harbor, which could have been prevented, but it wasn't. We didn't have the right use of intelligence. What did Roosevelt do? He put 110,000 innocent Japanese people of Japanese descent into camps, not concentration camps or death camps, but they were still camps. And those were all false positives. They wouldn't have committed, maybe 1 or 2 of them would have committed treason or espionage, but certainly nothing to justify that kind of mass reaction. So what happens is we wait. We have the false negative, we wait, the event occurs, and then we overreact. And so we're wrong on both sides of the equation. We don't do enough before, and we do too much after.
I'm sure you can probably even do it in Latin. I'm sure you remember Cicero's maxim, in war, the laws are silent. Are we in war all the time now, Professor? Are we, well, now that there is no abroad, now that we have hypersonic missiles, are we always at war?
We are always at war. And not only are we at war, but our allies are at war. Look at Israel; they're at war 24/7, and they fell into the same trap that we've just talking about with Pearl Harbor. They didn't do enough to prevent October 7th. It was a disaster, the worst intelligence disaster in modern history, not preventing October 7th. And now maybe people are arguing Israel is overreacting. Maybe they're doing too much. But that's inevitable. That happens. Every country does that. I can't think of a single example in history where a country was unprepared, allowed a disaster to occur, which could have been prevented, and then overreacted after the fact. That's why we need to construct a jurisprudence to tell us how to balance the mistakes on either side. We're doing it wrong because we haven't really thought it through. I've been thinking about this now for 60 years. I was teaching prevention for 60 years, and law schools haven't caught up. They don't teach it. They don't think about it. Yeah, you mentioned the movie Minority Report. That's the closest we've ever come to having a major public debate on this issue of prevention. I'm hoping my book, The Preventative State, will stimulate a debate, at least among academic colleagues. I don't think it will. I'll give you an example. I sent 100 copies of this book to every single member of the law school faculty at Harvard, every single member, the dean, the president of the university. I have not gotten a single response because I defended Trump. People aren't writing to me. People aren't going to read my book. This is one of the most important books written about the law in modern times, in not only my view, but you read some of the blurbs of Stephen Breyer.
Stephen Breyer blurbed your book.
He introduced it. Larry Summers blurbed my book. Ed Erwin Chemerinsky. They all thought it was a very important book. But the Harvard Law School faculty doesn't want to have anything to do with me.
I want to ask you about Brandenburg test. I don't think it works anymore because of the fact that okay, so what do we replace it with? You know what it is, I know what it is, my audience knows what it is because I've taught them it. What do we replace it with?
We replace it with a looser definition of incitement. You can incite, it doesn't have to be one-on-one incitement. Under Brandenburg, it has to be me talking to you basically and saying, go out and kill somebody. If you get somebody in front of a crowd saying, globalize the Intifada, Palestine should be free of Jews from the river to the sea, there's a real argument that those can incite the kind of killings that we saw in the District of Columbia. That's a debate worth having.
And have you seen any indication from SCOTUS that they're moving that way? Because they got stuck in a rut because of Justice Kennedy, and God bless him, but it was Justice Kennedy who messed up the jurisprudence over war prisoners who were being detained at Gitmo. Do you think that the court can get out of the rut?
I do. I think this Supreme Court is very pragmatic. Kavanaugh, Barrett, Gorsuch, they're very pragmatic. And I think the other two are a little ideological, but they're ideological, I think, perhaps on the right side of this issue. So I think they can get out of this rut. I think we're going to see the first movement is going to be a limitation on New York Times versus Sullivan. Now, that's going to be the malice requirement that judges decide whether there's malice or not is, I hope, going to be thrown out. I'm bringing such a case, so I'm hoping that will happen. I work on
that
New York Times.
That will itself be part of the preventative state. It will prevent a lot of incendiary rhetoric, which will in turn fuels incendiary acts. I mean, if we just cut it back a little bit, you're working on the preventative state, aren't you?
Yeah, and this comes from somebody who worked on New York Times versus Sullivan. I was one of the law clerks that helped write one of the opinions in New York Times versus Sullivan, and now I regret how it's been applied.
Were you a Fortis clerk? Who did you clerk for?
Arthur Goldberg, who was on the court before.
Goldberg,
Fortis.
you're a Goldberg clerk. There aren't many of you because Johnson talked him off of the court.
Yeah, there are only 6 of us. Steve Breyer is one of them as well.
Oh, no kidding. Oh, that's real inside baseball. Professor Alan Dershowitz is being generous with his time. His brand new book is The Preventative State. The Preventative State is available at Amazon, at Barnes & Noble, every bookstore that's online, every bookstore in America, probably most airports in America. And The Preventative State asks the question, what are we going to do to stop serious harm? Now, Professor Dershowitz, you have seen and I have seen what happened to the young two Jews in D.C. last week, murdered at close range by a fanatic from Chicago who knew what he was doing and went to the Capitol Jewish Museum. I bet you we could have predicted that, but we might also have predicted that the other people in his radical fringe group and the members of Antifa are going to do violent things. How do you change the law to deal with the mortal lock, as we used to say in the horse betting business, of someone doing violence?
Well, not only could it have been predicted, but in my book, The Preventive State, I actually predicted it. I predicted it in two of my books. This book, and also I wrote a book called The Palestinianism. And I predicted it. And I predicted it based on my experience. I defended a lot of protesters during the Vietnam War, and some of them were violent. And some of the violent ones turned into murderers. Kathy Boudin became a murderer, murdered two policemen. The Weathermen became murderers. They planted bombs that killed people. So when you tolerate and encourage, the way, for example, the Harvard Divinity School and Public Health School encourage violent actions against Jews and against Israel, when you encourage that, when you tolerate students kidnapping two janitors at Columbia University, you're going to see the move from this kind of violence to going out and getting a gun and killing. It's going to happen. I got an honorary degree last week from a small college in Florida. The security people, this is the day after the killing in D.C., the security people came over to me and said, "Sorry, Professor Dershowitz, but we have to give you a route to escape. We will have extra guards, and they will have bulletproof shields to protect you because we're worried that there could be copycat attempts to get at you the way they killed these two people." So, and by the way, it's always the case. They come for the Jews first, but they're never the last. We're always the canary in the mine shaft. And when you start killing, and by the way, one of the people killed in this community wasn't Jewish. He was a very religious evangelical Christian. But when
Yes.
you go after Jews and start killing them, Christians come next.
Well, let me close this way. The Preventative State. I'm going to read it as soon as it arrives. I want to get you back in June after I've had a chance to digest it and talk professorial level stuff with you when I've read your case study. But in terms of the rule, I always like a black letter law. I teach con law students. I try and teach them how to pass the bar.
Right.
What do you think the black letter law is going to end up having to be about imminent threat and detention?
I think if you see imminent threats, there's going to be a constitutional right to detain. I think we're going to begin to err on the side of security a little bit more. You know, as Ben Franklin said, we shouldn't give up a lot of liberty for a little bit of security, but you have to give up a little bit of liberty for a lot of security. And the thesis of the preventive state is to try to decide exactly how much liberty, how much non-essential liberty are we prepared to give up in order to prevent how many cataclysmic events that we could prevent, but we're not preventing now. Could we have prevented 9/11? Yes. Could we have prevented Pearl Harbor? Yes, but at a cost. And the question is, what is that cost, and is it worth it? And that's what I argue in my book, The Preventive State.
Last question, Professor. We need a dialogue on this. We need a dialectic. Has any academic of any standing engaged you yet on the preventative state? Because that's how you actually move forward.
Yeah, and they won't. As long as I don't renounce Donald Trump, and as long as I proudly say I defended him the way John Adams defended the people who were accused of the Boston Massacre, as soon as I say that Trump's first impeachment was unconstitutional, and I'm happy I defended him, as long as I say that, academics will not engage me. They have canceled me. They ignore me. I wrote this book for history. Maybe in 5 years, in 10 years, people will begin to appreciate this. I believe that we will have a jurisprudence for the preventive state. But I think my defense of Donald Trump has prevented this from becoming part of the dialogue at current American universities. And that is
I wouldn't
worst.
send it to Harvard Law. I would send it to the Senate, and I'd also send it to the justices and maybe the D.C. Circuit, someone who's going to have the ability and the authority to actually act on a rational basis to move the law forward, because we have to get Brandenburg doesn't work, New York Times v. Sullivan doesn't work anymore. It was great for the 60s and the 70s. It's not great for the WMD era. And by the way, does Israel have a counterpart to this in their law?
No, Israel does have some restrictions on free speech. In actual practice, they have an enormous amount of free speech, but they don't have a constitution. And all I want to do is start a debate. I'm not sure I know the answer. I want to hear from everybody. I used to want to hear from the American Civil Liberties Union, but the ACLU has become the anti civil liberties union. They have nothing to say about this, but organizations like FIRE do have something to say about this. I want to hear from all people, from civil libertarians, from free speech advocates. I want that debate to begin. And the preventive state should be pushing us toward having that debate because we have to be able to prevent and at the same time not deny people the basic rights of free speech.
Alan Dershowitz, thank you for joining me. I'll be back in June. The book will have caught up with me on my travels. The Preventive State is in bookstores now. That's what it looks like if you're watching on the Salem News Channel, if you're listening on the Salem Radio Network. Preventive State, Alan Dershowitz. You cannot miss it. You ought to read it. You ought to be part of the debate going forward. Professor D, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate the time.
They're very, very intelligent questions. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
What? I hope so. It's what I do. Not as long as you do it, but it's what I do. Thank you so much. Listen, friends, I want to remind all of you I'm going on vacation. I'm going to be gone for 2 weeks. I'm on the Hillsdale College cruise. And I want to remind you, I'm taking my Relief Factor with me. And I'm taking my Relief Factor with me, not because they sponsor the show. I'm not going to be on the air. I'm taking my Relief Factor with me because I've got the dreaded overhead bin that I've got to put stuff into tonight. I'm going to be going up and down hill and dale. I'm going to be bicycling. I'm going to be doing up lots of steps. Whatever the fetching Mrs. Hewitt wants to do, she gets to do. We go to a lot of wonderful places. There are a lot of hills involved, a lot of narrow streets, and she's a big bicyclist fan when we're out in a town like Lisbon or another place. And when we're there, I want to be able to feel good during and after and the next day, and I will because of Relief Factor. Icarian and curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. You take Relief Factor every day, you feel better the next day. You shake off any kind of weariness, it's gone. You don't get the minor aches and pains that come with exercise or the dreaded overhead bin, which is, I think, the most dangerous thing in the world for people over the age of 50. But Relief Factor wants you to give it a try. Call 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief. 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief. And that will get you to the site. They'll say, hey, I want the starter pack, $19.95. It's less than $1 a day for 3 weeks. You try it 3 times a day for 3 weeks. That gets the levels of the 4 supplements up. I always tell people, I haven't taken a supplement other than Relief Factor for more than 20 years, and I'm not going to in the future. Because I feel good, I'm blessed. And I'm not going to GNC and trying to replicate what they've done in Relief Factor. They made it easy. They put it in a little pack. And I want you to go to their website and find the starter pack, $19.95. Try it for 3 weeks. Thereafter, it's once a day, 3 weeks, 3 times a day, once a week, once a day thereafter. ReliefFactor.com, ReliefFactor.com. Love talking to Alan Dershowitz. Really, really a smart guy. I want to talk to the smart people out there who may not be aware of what they're paying for their cell phone. I have switched to Consumer Cellular. I want you to consider doing so as well. Their number is 1-800-411-4454, 1-800-411-4454. Now, I'm going to tell you a lot about Consumer Cellular, but I want you to remember this. If you're a new customer, you get a $5 credit for the first 5 monthly invoices, but you got to do it through consumercellular.com/Hugh. You can get details there as well. Now, what do I want you to know? Big Cellular oversells like pretty much everyone. They upsell. And if you're on a budget and you're getting older, you probably don't need as much data as you're paying for. Now, I've always had an unlimited data plan because I live on the web and I work on the web and I'm consuming a lot of media on the web. But that's going down. It does for anyone over 50. The people who eat up data are gamers, and I'm not a gamer. So I'm going to check into that as well. But if you're over 50, you probably only need 10 gigs, not unlimited. If you need unlimited, by the way, Consumer Cellular will give you 2 lines for $60 a month. Pretty hard to beat that. But, in fact, I don't think Big Cellular can beat that. But you can keep your phone number, you can keep all your data, transfer it all over, and get a new device if you want. Call them, find out. 1-800-411-4454 or consumercellular.com/Hugh. The reality is you can have savings without sacrifice. You don't You don't want to sacrifice quality of service. You won't. You want the savings without the sacrifice. You get that with consumer cellular. The people in this space, big cellular, don't want you to ask questions and don't want you to understand what you're buying. It's the opposite of consumer cellular. That's why they target the people who are over 50. That's why they want you to actually ask yourself, do you know what you're paying for your cell bill? Because if you don't, you're overpaying. Give them a call, 800-411-4454, and you will thank me. You will thank me. And I remind you again, new customers get a $5 credit on the first 5 monthly invoices. Visit consumercellular.com/Hugh for details. Now I want to go to Carolyn Levitt today, and along up at the front of the room, before it was reversed, Carolyn Levitt talked about the court decision yesterday by the Court of International Trade, cut number 2.
Last night, the Trump administration faced another example of judicial overreach. Using his full and proper legal authority, President Trump imposed universal tariffs and reciprocal tariffs on Liberation Day to address the extraordinary threat to our national security and economy posed by large and persistent annual U.S. goods trade deficits. The United States has run a trade deficit of goods every year since 1975. In 2024, our trade deficit in goods exceeded $1 trillion. Everybody agrees this is unacceptable. President Trump is delivering on his promise to fix this problem, and he has taken a long overdue and much needed bold stance for American workers after decades of our manufacturing base being hollowed out. The president's rationale.
Next, I want to go to Harry Enton over at CNN, because there's been a lot of conversation about President Trump's showdown with Harvard. And CNN did a poll that went into the field that's broader than Harvard, but give a listen, cut number 12.
I think going into this, I think a lot of Americans thought that higher ed needed a nice kick in the rear end. What am I talking about here? Well, why don't we take a look at high confidence in higher education? You go back a decade ago, 57% of Americans had high confidence in higher education. Look at where we are now. That number has plummeted as of last year, down to 36%. We're talking about a 36-point drop among Republicans specifically. Get this, 68% of Americans said that higher education was on the wrong track. So it's a question of whether or not people agree with Trump's tactics, but they definitely agree with him on the idea that there is a problem with higher ed overall.
One thing you've heard from President Trump and many Republican allies for quite some time is accusing colleges and universities across the country of not being a friendly place for conservatives, if you will. How do the American public feel?
Yeah, so, do colleges have a liberal bias? I think that's really the question here. And what we see in polling after polling after polling is that the plurality say yes. Overall, look at that, 45% of Americans overall agree with the idea that colleges have a liberal bias. Just 24% disagree with that idea. Look among Republicans.
Those 24% are dummies. I mean, really, dummies. Dummy. Now, not in the hard sciences. That's not the question. That's not the question. Colleges, very few exceptions. Hillsdale, Grove City, Colorado Christian, Benedictine, very, very few exceptions are over the left side of the cliff. And the 24% who don't think they are, you need to learn something about colleges. Don't go anywhere, America. Joined by Josh Kroshauer, editor-in-chief of Jewish Insider. Hello, Josh. I want to cut right to the chase. Earlier today, Steve Witkoff submitted a proposed hostage deal to both Israel and Hamas. Netanyahu said they accept it. Hamas said they have reservations and they want amendments. That's a rejection in my book. Is it a rejection in your book?
Not quite sure we're at that point yet. It does seem like there is some optimism that there could be this interim deal that's struck. Netanyahu, I mean, the sticking point is that the deal would have a 60-day ceasefire, but then Israel would have the ability to go back and continue its military operations in Gaza. That's what Hamas is rejecting. They want to obviously stay in power. So that is the one hiccup. Otherwise, it is very similar to the other deals we've seen in the past where in this iteration that Witkoff proposed, it would entail the release of 10 of the remaining 20 living hostages and the bodies of, I believe, 18 deceased hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. and the resumption of humanitarian aid delivered by the UN as opposed to the Israel-U.S. joint operation taking place right now.
There is also, in the Times of Israel, note that Hamas wants Israel's defense forces to return to where they were at the end of the last ceasefire. I can't imagine the IDF agreeing to that, Josh. That's a major difference. That's what we would call a material departure of terms in the law.
Yes, and this has sort of been the obvious dispute from the get-go that ever since October 7th, the Biden administration has said Hamas cannot remain in power in Gaza. They have to be replaced. Hamas obviously wants this, even in its diminished state, is trying to hold on to power. Israel's operation, the latest version of its operation, though I think the mission is a little bit muddled and it hasn't been really clearly articulated as well as it could by the prime minister, but it's designed to oust Hamas from power. So ultimately, there's been this tension between making sure that all the hostages are released versus allowing Hamas to live another day, so to speak.
Now, Josh, one of the things that I've become aware of, with 5 divisions of the IDF now operating in Gaza, the reservists are worn out. Hamas wins every time the IDF slows down. And I know 5,000 people were in Hostage Square last night, but I really don't know how they keep the reservists going. It's been 600 days. Do you think the Trump team understands delay is in fact a win for Hamas?
Well, look in Israel itself, the home front is exhausted. You have had a state of war really since right after October 7th. Politically in Israel, and this is something that's a little bit different than in the past, you do have polls that suggest that majorities of Israelis would prefer some sort of a deal that would get all the remaining hostages home and essentially leave Hamas in power. If that was the choice, if it was a black and white choice just like that. I think the Trump administration, Steve Witkoff, there's been fits and starts, but I think the Trump administration is trying to put a little pressure on the Israeli government to strike a deal, to try to put the war behind everyone, and that would also leave Hamas in place. Or there's really not a day 2 plan of what would happen to Gaza. But there is a lot of war weariness. It's definitely in Israel and in the United States. You're seeing the Trump administration really start to get a little more antsy and trying to put perhaps a little more pressure on the Netanyahu government.
Correct me if I'm wrong, though, Joshua. The Netanyahu government said yes to the Witkoff proposal, and Hamas did not say yes. I don't know what they said, but they didn't say yes. Am I correct?
That is the state right now as we speak. The Netanyahu government has reportedly, at least according to the Times of Israel, has principally backed the Witkoff proposal, and Hamas has not officially said yes, though there are some reports that say that they're likely to accept it. So we'll see where that goes.
Yeah, and if they accept it, it's up to Israel to decide what to accept, and Netanyahu may be betting on the fact that Hamas can't say yes in the end because it's only 60 days, and the resumption of the war can happen after 2 months, and 10 hostages is 10 hostages. That's an enormous deal. That's a big deal. Do 10 more come out at the end of the remaining come out at the end of the 60 days?
Not in this deal. I mean, it would be still. Then that's, by the way, in Israel, the opposition, those who are against this type of deal, have said that. I think one Israeli minister said it's like slicing the salami. You're not getting all the hostages home. You're just again taking a frag or half of the remaining living hostages. So, and there's also Netanyahu just this week announced that Mohammed Sinwar, the brother of the Hamas's former leader and mastermind of the October 7th attack, was killed. I mean, there's only so many leaders left in Hamas. Hamas is still in power, but it's in a far diminished state. So there's a question, in Israel, when do you declare maybe at least some degree of victory and focus on Iran, focus on the other threats in the region, and not, there's a certain desire to get all the hostages home, even if it does leave a very diminished Hamas in place.
Well, Gaza itself is very diminished. I don't know who's left to run Hamas. I want the public to understand Netanyahu and his government said yes. Hamas did not say yes. And that therefore, if the deal doesn't happen, it's not Israel's fault. They said yes. And to me, that's vital. Now, Josh, second question. Are you alarmed by President Trump's comments about promising signs from Iran?
Well, am I alarmed? Look, I think what we're seeing right now is Iran trying to kind of stall. They know that they need some time to rebuild their defenses of their nuclear facilities that Israel was able to take out just about a year ago. So it does feel like, I don't know if I haven't heard any tangible signs of real progress in the talks. There's leaks here and there, but we keep having talks to have talks. And that gives Iran time to build back its. That's what Israeli leaders, including the Prime Minister of Israel, Bibi Netanyahu, are worried about. That these talks could go on indefinitely and allow Iran the ability to build up its defenses and prevent Israel from, striking their facilities or doing an operation that otherwise could be easier at this moment when they're sort of, as they say in Israel, naked. The Iranian defenses are naked right now because of that.
But we don't know how long they will be that way. Josh Kroshauer, always good to talk to you. Follow Josh on X at Josh Kroshauer. The market's closed, of course, about an hour ago. Let me check in. Brought to you by AmericanFederal.com. If you're going to buy gold or any precious metals, do it with Nick Rovich and his team at AmericanFederal.com. 800-221-7694. So I buy gold from. I trust him. Straightforward, transparent. He and his fellow colleagues at AmericanFederal.com have been doing this for 42, soon to be 43 years. Very transparent. How much do you want to buy? Here's our commission. Here's what the price of gold is today. There's no guarantee it will be there tomorrow. We will renegotiate if it goes up or down, depending on what. But it's very, very, very transparent, very, very, very honest, very, very, very quick. Gold today closed at $3,340, up 1.4%. So the dip was yesterday, and the dip is gone. Maybe it'll come back. I'm not a prophet or a son of a prophet. Gold has been left $2,800 behind $500 ago, a long time ago. I don't see it going back down, but I am not an advisor. I just believe in diversification of your portfolio, and holding some precious metals, gold or silver, makes sense to me. I do. I put it in the safety deposit box. I buy it every year at the same time. And that's what I think you might want to consider. But talk about a plan for precious metals with Nick. He's been doing it a long time. They also buy gold at AmericanFederal.com. And again, 800-221-7694. Okay day on Wall Street. Dow was up 0.2%. S&P up 0.31%. The NASDAQ up 0.31%. The gold went up 1.39%. Telling you a lot of different things, including the fact that in the morning, the trade deal had been all blown up by the out-of-control court that could have offered their opinion and not issued a permanent injunction. In the afternoon, after the market closed, the Federal Circuit put that holding. They stayed it pending arguments, which is what the district court, three-judge district court, ought to have done yesterday, but didn't, because it was reckless, like I said on America's Newsroom this morning. But who knows what that means to the market tomorrow? I don't know. I just know that gold today, $3,340.80. And that if you're going to buy gold, do it with our friend Nick Rovich and his team at AmericanFederal.com. Let me close by reminding you about Angel Tree. It's up to Dwayne and Kurt Schlichter and Ed Morrissey and Mark Davis when I'm away to get you to give to Angel Tree. But you've been very generous in the first 2 weeks. I've encouraged Dwayne to beat me. I don't think he can. I don't have much confidence in that because you folks stepped up in a big way already. But if you are going to step up, please do so today to make Dwayne's lift harder over the next 11 broadcasts. Angel Tree takes care of kids, gets them a week in the summer camp, who have a mom and or a dad in jail. Give a listen to an alum.
Without camp, I definitely would not be the person that I am today. I would not know Christ. I would not be able to be the loving person that I am. I wouldn't have compassion. I wouldn't have a family. I wouldn't have a support system. And so being willing to support Angel Tree camping, it's not changing just a week for a kid. It's truly changing their life.
Angel Tree, the banner is at the top of HughHewitt.com. It costs $200 to send a kid to camp. Just $200. Send 5 if you can. Send 2 if you can with $400. Or send what you can. Angel Tree can also be reached by phone 888-206 206-2764, 888-206-2764. But the banner's at hughhewitt.com. I'm going way out to North Dakota to talk to Ed O'Keefe. Ed is the CEO of the Theodore Roosevelt Presidential Library Foundation, which will soon open its doors to the public out there in North Dakota. Hello, Ed. How are you?
Well, hello, Hugh. Good to be with you.
I got to tell you, every time I see Doug Burgum, both when he was governor of North Dakota and when he became Secretary of the Interior, when I see Senator Kramer, anyone with a North Dakota connection, they tell me about this library. Tell me about this library, Ed.
We're all singing from the same song sheet, Hugh. I mean, that's the North Dakota pride we've got going. Well, the Theodore Roosevelt Presidential Library is under construction in Medora, North Dakota, which is where TR came and lived as a rancher and a cowboy, lived what he'd later called a strenuous life for the better part of 2 years. He owned that ranch for almost 20 years and said, I never would have been president except for my experiences in North Dakota. He came a broken man to a broken land. He recovered and healed in nature, and he went on to become the great American president we all know and love. And on July 4th, 2026, the 250th anniversary of America, this incredibly unique institution on 93 acres of beautiful land in the Badlands of North Dakota will open to the American public and the world.
Now, Ed, we share something in common. I have twice been the CEO of the Nixon Foundation, and I oversaw the construction of the Nixon Library in 1989 to 1990. It's not easy getting people to pay attention to a construction site, but you've been pretty good at that. Why is that? Why the continuing fascination with Teddy Roosevelt?
Well, I think Theodore Roosevelt is like a Rorschach test. I mean, what you see in him says more about you than it does about him. I mean, Elizabeth Warren's favorite president is TR. Josh Hawley's favorite president is TR. Obama and Romney's favorite president, TR. I mean, it's a remarkable kind of person that brings together Democrats, independents, Republicans. Everybody seems to find something they love about this enduring figure. And he's a quintessentially American president. He kicks open the door to the American century. He's the first president in an airplane, the first in a submarine, the first to go in a motorcade, the first American to win the Nobel Peace Prize. He saves the game of football. And oh, by the way, basically reinvents the concept of the national park system, 234 million acres of conserved land, doubling the size of the national parks. I mean, he's just something for everyone in Theodore Roosevelt's presidency. But I feel a kinship with you, Hugh. It's not an easy job to get folks to pay attention to a president who's been gone from the earth for 100 years. You had the benefit of Nixon being with you during some of your process. Obviously, TR is not with us during this one, but it's he's with us in spirit.
Ed, how did you end up doing this? Because it's unusual. I always ask other presidential library foundation directors. I don't know if yours is going to the archive when you're done, but mine didn't. Ours stayed private for many, many years, and then it went to the archive, and then I went back and ran the foundation again. I'm just curious, how did you end up at the TR Foundation?
You, Hugh, I spent some time in media, and after I was done in media, I was thinking about what to do next. I wrote a book about Theodore Roosevelt. I'm from North Dakota, and I met Doug Burgum, and Doug is a heck of a salesman. He's a very good recruiter. If you don't want to do something, do not have Doug Burgum be the person recruiting you to do it. It's a remarkable opportunity. I mean, it's something so unique and so special for my home state of North Dakota and for the nation. It's a gift for America and for the world, but it's not something I ever expected in my career, and I'm just blessed that the opportunity came to me.
Now, the interesting part is you have a lot of land. Nixon Library was on 20 acres. Reagan Library had a lot of land. Other ones are on less land. What are you going to do with all that land? 94 acres is a lot of land. How big is the actual museum footprint?
Yeah, it's a great question, Hugh. So the actual library is 100,000 square feet. It's in a west wing, which contains the exhibit experience, and an east wing where we have a 301-seat auditorium as well as classroom space, But the 93 acres is really what makes it special. It's designed by Snohetta, an American architect that's done some extraordinary work in our country. They did the 9/11 Museum here in New York. They did the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art out in California. They're landscape architects, and we like to say that the library is the landscape. So as opposed to Reagan or Nixon or many of the other libraries in the system, you have space to not just get in, but get out, to go on a hike, to go on a mountain bike ride, to ride a horse up to the library. I mean, it wouldn't be the TR Presidential Library if you couldn't ride a horse to it. And indeed, you can do that. So we want families to come. We want the Theodore Roosevelt Presidential Library to be the presidential library where kids drag their parents and families can really get to know this American hero and to decide how they can be a part of America and how they can contribute and give back in their civic and citizenship duties.
So some people won't know this. The landscape and building architect is often different from the museum designer. And museum design is a specialty. There are a lot of fabulous museum design companies out there. Who are you working with, and what they bring to the project? Why'd you pick them?
I love this, Hugh. I never get these questions, so I'm clearly talking to someone who knows his way around presidential libraries. So we're working with a great firm called Local Projects, and we're trying to design something that's not really your father's presidential library. We're going to have a narrative gallery that has traditional objects under glass, artifacts, exactly what you'd expect, the chronological experience of Theodore Roosevelt's life. But between those, you have adventure galleries where you can immerse yourself in the experience of TR's life. We want people to do things and feel things. In the boyhood recreation of his Roosevelt Museum of Natural History, we want you to feel curious, to reach inside a tree trunk and explore what's inside, to open a book and an extinct species of bird might join a wall of wonder. We really feel like Theodore Roosevelt's life is an example. You're learning not just about Roosevelt, you're learning from him. So you can decide the change you want to be in the world and get in the arena just like TR. So we're working with Local Projects. We're working with Dimensional Innovations out of Kansas City. We're working with some fabulous set designers and exhibit designers, Split Rock Studios and Blue Rhino out of Minnesota. We've got so many subcontractors, I can hardly keep track of them at the moment, because it's going to be a really fabulously immersive, almost theatrical experience.
Well, it sounds wonderful, Ed. Now, the most important question is location, location, location. It's going to open on July 4th next year, on the 250th birthday. Which interstate is it close to? Because I want people to see in their mind a map. North Dakota isn't exactly on everyone's journey, but everyone will go once they know they can get to the TR library. How do you get there?
The journey is the destination. We're on Interstate 94. We're only about 4 hours north of Mount Rushmore. We're 20 miles from the Montana border, about 5 hours from Yellowstone National Park, and about 6 hours from Glacier. So we hope people are going to travel the TR Triangle. They're going to be families on their Great American Road Trip. They're going to see Mount Rushmore. They're going to come to the Theodore Roosevelt Presidential Library, maybe head out west and go do Yellowstone or Glacier. And we are right next to Theodore Roosevelt National Park, the only park named for a person, let alone a president. So there's already 800,000 visitors a year that come to Theodore Roosevelt National Park. It's a great, beautiful 74,000 acre park. Again, a place where you can go out and picnic or horseback ride. We've got a 144-mile mountain biking trail that goes right by the library and next to some of the most beautiful parts of the park. So it's going to be a destination for people to spend some time, not just in the museum, but outdoors, in nature, being in the place where Theodore Roosevelt actually lived, actually ranched, actually was a cowboy, and you too can go discover the wonders that he explored in his time.
Very last, very practical question. Where do people want to have their conference there stay? Have you figured out with a hotel partner yet, or a chain partner yet? We got a minute, Ed.
You got to stay at the Rough Rider Hotel. We got about 600 hotel rooms in town, and the Rough Rider is awesome. The Badlands Motel is right there. With the National Park there, and with our partners over at the Theodore Roosevelt Medora Foundation, they put on a summer musical from Memorial Day to Labor Day. You can see a great American musical, and an outdoor amphitheater seats 3,000 people. Plenty of places to stay, plenty of places to eat. This is the next great American road trip for you and your family. So come on out to Medora, North Dakota after July 4th, 2026. You can see the TR Library, and it's an inaugural year.
And Ed, what's the website?
trlibrary.com. Get in the arena. Join us at trlibrary.com.
Ed O'Keefe, great to talk to you. trlibrary.com. Go make a plan. July 4, 2026, a new must-get-to destination. I am glad to give a lift to a fellow Presidential Foundation exec. Earlier today, Molly Hemingway, our friend Molly Hemingway, who you see on Fox News, often a guest here, a friend of the program, took the new media seat that was originally occupied by our friends from the Ruthless podcast, John Ashbrook. Molly was in the chair today, and here's her exchange with Carolyn Levitt, cut number 3.
In our new media seat today, we have the editor-in-chief of The Federalist, Molly Hemingway. The Federalist is led by Molly and Sean Davis and provides fearless journalism and coverage of politics and culture to millions of readers all over the world. Thank you for being here, Molly, and why don't you please kick us off?
Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you.
In the first Trump administration, there was an effort to stymie the agenda of Trump through the Russia collusion hoax perpetuated by many people in the media, including some people seated here, or the media outlets they represent, and other Democrats as well. The second Trump administration, to reference what you said at the beginning, seems to be subject to an effort to stymie the agenda using rogue lower court judges. You mentioned that the Supreme Court could and should do something to rein in these lower court judges. Also, Congress could do something about it, but they don't seem terribly interested in it. It also seems there's not much of an actual coordinated effort from this White House to take and tackle this effort from judges, Democrats and other people using these judges to stymie the agenda. Is there an actual effort by this White House to tackle this issue in a comprehensive way, and if so, what is it?
There is an effort by this administration to tackle these rogue judges and the injunctions and the blockades that we have faced in our broken judicial system in every case. I mean, we have seen time and time again these lower district court judges ruling against this administration in the president's basic executive authority and powers. And this administration is fighting every single one of those battles in court, including already the block that came down from the Tariff court, the IEPA court last night. And as on my way out here to the briefing room, I understand that there was another district court judge right here in Washington, D.C. who ruled against the president's tariff power. And I will get to the heart of your question, and I'm glad that we are addressing this in the room today, because nationwide injunctions ordered against the first Trump administration, Trump 1.0, account for more than half of the injunctions issued in this country since 1963. And President Trump had more injunctions in one full month of office in February than Joe Biden had in 3 years. And let me roll through some of these radical injunctions to paint the picture for the American people at home. These are not just talking points. These are real judges in the court of law who are trying to block the president's power and the policies that he was elected to enact. For example, a court ordered the Trump administration to return already deported terrorist aliens back to the United States. A court has ruled the Trump administration can't even temporarily pause our refugee programs. Courts prohibited the Trump administration from eliminating federal funding for child transgender surgery and mutilation, a practice that the American people overwhelmingly reject. A court also held that the Trump administration could not ban people experiencing gender dysphoria or mental health issues from serving in the military. Ridiculous. Courts prohibited the removal of transgender women from women's prisons despite potential physical harm to real women in those prisons, biological women. A Northern District of California judge issued an absurd ruling that the president cannot fire people within the executive branch without Congress passing a bill, even though Congress has expressly authorized the president through the Office of Personnel Management to authorize reductions in force across agencies A court also ordered the Trump administration to rehire thousands of already fired employees in several cases. A federal judge blocked the Trump administration from defunding the Department of Education, another signature campaign promise that this president has the power to implement. Courts ordered the Trump administration could not eliminate funding for illegal DEI programs, hence the word illegal. These are illegal programs to begin with, and now the courts are trying to say this president can't roll them back. And a district court judge prohibited the president from issuing any categorical funding freezes. And then another court ordered on top of that the administration makes $2 billion of payments in 36 hours. These are just a few of the ridiculous orders that we have seen from lower district court judges every day, and we hope that the Supreme Court will weigh in and rein them in.
Carolyn was cooking today. I mean, really cooking with gas. Cut number 6, a reporter who was criticizing nearly perfectly executed distribution of aid in Gaza yesterday under the new system, cut number 6.
This administration's been briefed about the incident that happened in Gaza on Tuesday during the rollout of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation distribution of aid to Palestinians there. And should there be a ceasefire, will this administration continue to rely on this foundation for the distribution of aid to civilians?
Are you referring, what incident are you referring to?
Tuesday,
when the aid was rolled out to Gaza for the first time in many months, and meals and food was given to hungry people thanks to President Trump. Yes, we were briefed on that plan. The president was the reason that that aid went into Gaza, and he got the Israelis to support that plan. And I would add that the previous administration rejected such a plan to ensure that these starving and devastated people in the Gaza Strip were given humanitarian aid and assistance. And it was the previous administration that tried to build this pier, if you all remember it. It was brought to my attention this morning, and I thought that's a good point. Why don't I bring that up? Because there's been so much criticism. In fact, it was on the front page of a newspaper this morning about the criticism for this president having a humanitarian heart and giving people badly needed food and supplies. Nobody wanted to talk about how the previous administration failed in that endeavor. They built this pier that cost $230 million. It lasted about 20 days, and more than 60 U.S. service members were injured, as a part of this floating aid pier that did nothing for the people of Gaza. The president is opening up his humanitarian heart to get aid into the region while his team simultaneously negotiates a ceasefire and the return of all hostages. We are moving the ball forward in a positive direction for all people. The president wants to see peace for all people.
Bravo, Carolyn Levitt. There's more. I have more after the break. Let me remind you, the one big beautiful bill passed the House. Now with the Senate. Senate's on recess. They come back next week. I wrote a Fox News column today about how they might tweak it and make it better without losing House support. You can go find that at Hugh Hewitt, Fox News. But the key is to get it passed. TaxCutsNow.com, set up by our sponsor, Job Creators Network. I want you to go and enlist yourself in the effort to make the members of the Senate aware that you support passing one big, beautiful bill. Now, they're not going to do so without tinkering. They are the United States Senate, co-equal branch of the Congress, a separate branch of the government. They have their constitutional authority. They're going to exercise it. They're going to try and make it more to their liking. Perfectly fine. Don't be slow. Don't say no. Try and improve it, keeping in mind that Mike Johnson's got as narrow a group, even actually narrower, because the Republicans have 53 out of 100, and he only has, he got Tom Massey, who's, I don't know, from outer space. So he can only afford to lose 2. The Republicans can lose 3. So you can't mess too much with what the House passed. But you can add to it. You can spend a little bit more. You can add a little more reform of waste, fraud, and abuse. You can do a lot of things. But if you go to TaxCutsNow.com, you can put your name to a note that will go to your 2 senators and your congressperson about your support of the one big, beautiful bill. But you only do that if you go to TaxCutsNow.com. That's TaxCutsNow.com. Don't wait another day. Go right now. Get in the game. TaxCutsNow.com. I want to remind you I'm in that period of the time where we are raising money for Angel Tree. They are a sponsor of this program, but every year I say, bring them on in. We want to get kids to camp. And we want to get kids to camp because a week in the woods with counselors, with other kids, for kids who have mom and or dad in jail behind bars that they don't see for years at a time sometime is just so necessary for those children. Give a listen to one of their alums.
Without camp, I definitely would not be the person that I am today. I would not know Christ. I would not be able to be the loving person that I am. I wouldn't have compassion. I wouldn't have a family. I wouldn't have a support system. And so being willing to support Angel Tree Camping, it's not changing just a week for a kid. It's truly changing their life.
You can change their life for $200. It costs $200 per child. And the reason I do it for 4 weeks, and Dwayne will pick it up tomorrow, and then Dwayne and Kurt Schlichter and Ed Morrissey and Mark Davis, who are filling in for me when I'm off with the Hillsdale gang, they will be asking you to do the same thing, and they're going to be relentless about it because every $200 is another child to camp. And they have to do this early, and they have to wrap it up by mid-June so that when they open the camps in mid-June, they know how long they can keep them open and how many kids they can call and say, yes, you get to go to camp. Now, you can go to my website. The banner for Angel Tree is at the top of my website. Or you can call them at 888-206-2764. 888-206-2764. 888-206-2764. When I hear podcasters giving out their subtext number or their various things, they don't say it 3 times. I always say it 3 times, but I said it wrong once. So I'm going to say it one more time. 888-206-2764. Thank you in advance. You're changing a child's life. You're changing their eternity, probably, and much appreciated. We think you are the most generous audience in the world, and I know that because year in and year out, you come through for these kids. Also, want to remind you, I've taken my Relief Factor bag up and put it next to the door before I leave the studio for the simple reason it's got to go with me. And Relief Factor, I already took it in the first hour. You saw me take it if you were watching on the Salem News Channel. And I can't stress to you enough, if you're doing any kind of a long vacation, if you're going to be dealing with the dreaded overhead bin and the lift, which is the most awkward thing in the world, especially if you're doing heavy carry-on, if you are going to do any kind of exercise that's unusual, and I will be, because Fetching Mrs. Hewitt believes in adventures. You know, I'm a beach guy. I would prefer to go to a beach and sit on it and read a Dickens novel, which is my every other year I get to do that. But every other year she gets to go on hill and dale. And that means biking in busy cities. And I'm not really good on a bike, but it's not a scooter like Dwayne's. And I get to go up and down hills because that's what she wants to do and it's her turn. And so she picks the excursions and I do the excursions with her. And that means Relief Factor is going to come in very, very handy. Carrying curcumin, resveratrol, and omega in every pack. Every pack helps your body's natural anti-inflammatory system keep pace with the unusual amount of activity or the unusual activity that you are doing. Do away with minor aches and pains. Not gonna knit together a broken bone. Not gonna pop a dislocated shoulder into place. It isn't that. Not a miracle. It just helps your body's anti-inflammatory system work. Therefore, most inflammation leads to pain. When you get rid of the inflammation, you get rid of the pain. Get rid of that nagging, minor ache and pain that bother you. Neck, shoulder, back, knees, ankle, whatever it is. Try ReliefFactor.com. Call 1-800-4 and the word relief. 1-800-4 and the word relief. Or go to their website. It's always at the website, and you can find the starter pack, $19.95, less than $1 a day, at ReliefFactor.com. I want to go back to Carolyn Levitt. That's ReliefFactor.com. Talking about Americans and optimism about the economy, cut number 14.
Americans are growing more and more optimistic about the economy under this president. Consumer confidence surged in May with the biggest monthly jump in 4 years, smashing expectations. According to the release from the Consumer Confidence Index, the increase in confidence was broad-based across all age groups, income groups, and political affiliations. Our country is clearly heading in the right direction under President Trump's bold leadership. For the first time in history of Rasmussen polling, a majority of Americans believe the country is on the right track. It's unsurprising because the president is fulfilling the promises he made to the American people.
That right track, wrong track number is really remarkable. It is a great sign for the economy. It's a great sign for the market. It's a great sign for you and for me. It's a great sign that everything is working. And the one big beautiful bill will make it work even better. Don't forget taxcutsnow.com, taxcutsnow.com. Make sure your voice is heard, taxcutsnow.com. I do not often spike the ball, but I'm going to today. Last night, the International Court of Trade, or the Court of International Trade, which is a very specialized niche court. It's a federal district court in essence. It's an Article III court, lifetime tenure. Special panel of three of them, three district court judges in effect, got together and they decided to reverse Donald Trump's tariffs in one fell swoop and relied upon the non-delegation doctrine in part, which is, if not dead, in a deep coma. And that's okay, too. I like the non-delegation doctrine. I'd like it to be revived, but it should not be revived by an obscure court on a massive national security issue because there's a lot of national security involved in this. So I understood their part of their reasoning. I didn't understand a lot of their reasoning, and I certainly did not like the fact that they did not stay their permanent injunction. They gave summary judgment for the plaintiffs against the president, and then they entered a permanent injunction against the terrorists, which threw everything into chaos. And I was asked to go on America's Newsroom this morning with Bill Hemmer and Dana Perino, and I spiked the ball a little bit now by playing it for you, but this was this morning at 9 o'clock, cut number 1.
Hewitt is here with us, Fox News contributor. Great to have you. Senator Kennedy was on with Laura Ingraham last night saying this.
I think it's pretty clear that the president has tariff authority. Congress gave it to him. Sooner or later, the Supreme Court is going to have to address this. Those who oppose the executive branch and those who oppose the legislative branch and are seeking recourse in the courts are at some point going to dig up more snakes than they can kill.
All right, Hugh, this all came down last night. A lot of people looking at it and from lots of different directions. So many opinions. What's yours?
Well, good morning, Dana. Good morning, Bill. I read the opinion this morning by Judges Katzman, Reif, and Rustani. The trade court is just another district court. It just has 3 district court judges hearing this. They're very good at trade matters, not so good at con law. It will be appealed to the Federal Circuit. It will eventually end up at the Supreme Court. I understand their ruling on the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, but they don't do a lot of con law, and I do not understand why they did not stay their injunction, because they are messing up a lot of ongoing negotiations. So I think it was reckless in the extreme for 3 district court judges to mess up all these international trade issues. And I do understand the China trade tariffs as being national security. I can even understand the 10% international, the global 10% tariff as being related to as a sort of tax on our defense budget that we do for the rest of the world. So whatever the opinion of these 3 judges, they're just district judges. They're not very self-aware. It's got to get up to the Federal Circuit. I hope it's stayed immediately. It's got to eventually go to the Supreme Court because the IEEP it's a case of first impression for this kind of a question under the IEEP of 77. So it'll eventually get to the Supreme Court. So I just wish they had stayed it, and I hope the Federal Circuit stays it today.
Okay.
That was this morning at 9:05. Then my program began at 3:06 p.m. Eastern Time. And I began with a monologue that played that, and then I explained to you why they ought to have stayed their injunction and why I hope the Federal Circuit would stay their injunction, because it was so reckless. And it's also kind of weird, part of their reasoning. Part of the reasoning is okay, part of the reasoning is not okay, and it's all about national security. It's not their job, it's not their lane. Stay in your lane, judges, especially if you're in a niche court. And while I was giving that monologue, the Federal Circuit issued the stay. So I just want to say, one of the reasons you listen to the Hugh Hewitt show is that I actually know what I'm talking about. A lot of people have a lot of opinions. I'm often wrong, not, I always tell you when I am, but I'm on the law more often right than wrong, and certainly more right than most every other person out there. There are a few people like Andrew McCarthy and Jonathan Turley. I had Dershowitz on earlier today, Professor D. There are some people I lean in close and listen to on some subject matter stuff, especially, for example, criminal law with Andy McCarthy and First Amendment law with John Turley, criminal pro with Dersh. But I know the non-delegation doctrine is dead, or in a coma so deep you would recognize it as dead. And so I read the opinion that this is just not a good idea to be issuing a permanent injunction and a summary judgment from 3 judges in an obscure court. And so I called my shot. I hit it, and I'm glad I did. Let me go back to Carolyn Levitt at the White House today talking about the One Big Beautiful Bill, cut number 13.
I also want to take the opportunity to debunk some false claims that have been circulating in the press about this bill. The blatantly wrong claim that the One Big Beautiful Bill increases the deficit is based on the Congressional Budget Office and other scorekeepers who use shoddy assumptions and have historically been terrible at forecasting across Democrat and Republican administrations alike. For example, just before Congress enacted the original Trump tax cuts at the end of 2017, the same CBO projected that growth would average a mere 1.9% over the next 10 years. However, by 2019, actual growth had surged to 3.4% once the Trump tax cuts went into effect, exceeding the CBO forecast by nearly 2 full percentage points. The CBO's latest forecast makes the same anemic growth assumptions as they did in 2017, missing the impact of the One Big Beautiful Bill. The CBO assumes long-term GDP growth of an anemic 1.8%, and that is absurd. The American economy is going to boom like never before after the One Big Beautiful Bill is passed. The largest middle-class tax cut in history, massive deregulation, and the most aggressive domestic energy exploration ever will fuel small businesses, further boost private investment, increase workers' wages, and supercharge economic growth. The Council of Economic Advisors has factored in the effects of all these pro-growth policies and estimated in their own analysis that growth will average 3% in the long run after the One Big Beautiful Bill is passed, which is nearly double the ridiculous CBO projection. This higher growth would result in $4.1 trillion in additional revenue over the next 10 years. Between the common sense spending reforms contained in the One Big Beautiful Bill and the robust economic growth that will be generated as a result of it, there will be no increase to the deficit. The same analysis from the CEA shows just how this historic package will unleash prosperity and ignite a blue-collar boom across America. But if the radical Democrats get their way and the One Big Beautiful Bill does not pass, Americans will face a whopping $4 trillion tax hike. This is unacceptable to President Trump. President Trump will not allow Democrats to massively raise Americans' taxes. Senate Republicans must get this bill passed.
I agree with her. And I want you to go to taxcutsnow.com and make sure your senators hear from you. We're going to lose a couple. There are some people who just won't take yes for an answer. But a massive tax hike on January 1 of this year is not, it would destroy the economy. We'd have a recession as deep as 2008. Not going to happen. Senators will get back and do their work. About to go on vacation for 2 weeks. Tomorrow, Dwayne will be guest hosting for me, though I have pre-recorded the Hillsdale Dialogue with Dr. Larry Arnn. Next week and the week thereafter, Dwayne, Ed Morrissey, Kurt Schlichter, Mark Davis, professionals all will be covering for me. Late breaking news, I go away. The IDF, Israeli Defense Forces, have issued a large evacuation order for northern Gaza. That tells me the ceasefire isn't going anywhere. And in fact, The Guardian, of all people, are reporting that Hamas has rejected it. So The Guardian is a left-wing newspaper out of England. Speaking of England, their Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, he got to be Prime Minister with like 40% of the vote, 38% of the vote, and he's gone down, down, down. He had a press conference. Here's a montage of it today, cut number 8.
Take some questions from the media. I've got a list here. Harry from the BBC first, please.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Harry. Thank you, Prime Minister. Harry Farley from BBC News. The speed of the decline in your popularity is historically unprecedented. Isn't this speech today an admission that you have failed and Nigel Farage understands voters better than you?
Got Peter from The Guardian.
On the wider issue of the opposition you're now facing, do you think one of the problems is that Nigel Farage can approximate talking like a human being, where you just resort to talking points and dodging questions?
Chris Hope. Chris.
Chris Hope, GB News. Prime Minister, Nigel Farage has 5 MPs. You've got 403. Are you panicking because Reform is so far ahead in the polls, it seems? Is he living rent-free in your brain? You went to a state school. Your dad worked in a factory. Your mum worked in the NHS. So why has a public school-educated former city trader got more in common with the Red Wall than you have?
That's rough. Nigel Farage has more in common with the Red Wall than you have. Why? And the answer is because the economy of Great Britain sucks. And they've turned their back on Israel. And yes, the Conservatives lost after 11 years of being in power. That's too long for any one party to have power in Great Britain. And they tossed out the Conservatives Tories were booted, and because they're first past the post, a lot of labor members won with 35, 36, 37% of the vote. It's a minority party with a lot of members. Don't mistake that for a majority party with a narrow majority, which is what the Republicans are. I'd rather be a majority party with a narrow majority than a minority party with a large majority, because then people look at you and they hammer you and hammer you and hammer you, and you go down, down, down. I want to thank Harley and Adam and Dwayne for holding down the fort when I'm gone. I want to close by reminding you about Angel Tree. You can go over to HughHewitt.com. Your $200 sends a kid to camp for a week. They get the vacation, a kid whose mom and or dad are behind bars, away, straitened circumstances. You make it possible for them to have a week of water balloons and canoeing trips and shaving cream fights and raids of other bunks. It's great fun, and they deserve that, and you make it happen. I just want to thank you as I go out the door. Thank Dwayne in advance for holding down the fort when I'm gone. In the meantime, take your Relief Factor, and remember, the Hugh Hewitt Show will always be here for you as long as I'm here and taking my Relief Factor.